Welcome to Tech Plugin 6, where we talk about using Microsoft Access, and we'll use it so that we can start exploring some of the database concepts we've covered in Tech Plugin 5 and also in Appendix C. To use the Tech plugin, you will need to have Microsoft Access installed on your PC. Now, we aren't in the lab since this is an online course, so one thing you can do if you don't have it is go to Outlook through your browser, and you'll get into Office 365, and in the top right where you see my pointer, you'll see something that says Install Office. With that, you'll be able to install Office 365 on your PC. So if you haven't done so, go ahead and install it so that you've got Microsoft Access on your PC. This is a Shepherd license that extends to all Shepherd students so that you'll have it, and it's a very good value for you because you'll avoid having to spend a considerable amount of money to get Office installed on your PC since you're entitled to it as a student. So you can start Microsoft Access by going to your Start Bar Applications, and it should show up under the list of applications starting with the letter A. Microsoft Office has several applications: Access, PowerPoint, Excel, and of course we've been using Excel. So what we'll be going over in this particular lesson, Tech Plugin 6, is to describe the primary functions of Microsoft Access, describe the steps for creating a new database file with Microsoft Access, describe the steps for creating and modifying a table and fields using Microsoft Access, and describe the steps for creating relationships between tables using Microsoft Access. And then I will give a demo of how to actually create a Microsoft Access database from a Microsoft Access or Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And of course that is your exercise for the Tech Plugin 6, is to actually do that. So we'll go ahead and get started. As background, Microsoft Access is a powerful database program, and it allows you to enter and organize large amounts of data. Access allows you to relate tables and databases to one another, and because of that, it's referred to as a relational database. A relational database is a group of tables that are related to one another by common fields. A table looks similar to a spreadsheet. Each row in the table contains all the data for a single record. Each column in the table contains a specific data value called a field. All records have the same fields. So to create a database using Microsoft Access, click the blank database option in the new File Task pane. So when you first start up, this is what it looks like. So I'll just go ahead and click Blank Database. And I've got a new table that was created. Another way of doing that is, instead of double-clicking, just click it, and it'll ask you where you want your database created. By default, it puts it into your Documents folder, and it gives it a name that is a sequential access, a sequential increase in the number of databases you've created. So I'll browse for a location for this one, and I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'm just going to call it new DB. And I'll go ahead and create it. And here we are, same place that we were before, except we've put it in a place where we would like to see it, and then also given it a name that's more meaningful to our application. Now, we can also open an existing database as well. So I'll go ahead and close this database. Then I'll go up to File, Open, and I can browse for databases. So I'll go up to my desktop, and here's a couple of databases. I'll go ahead and open one called Slopeside Bikes, and you can see that I've got this database open now in Access. So we can create a new database, and we can also open an existing database. Whenever a database is open, Access displays the database window, which you see now. The database window serves as a central location for working with the database objects, tables, queries, forms, reports, and so on, that are in the opened database. You can open database objects in different views. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my bicycle database, and you can see I've got one record in there now. And I can switch from the datasheet view, which shows me the records I have, to design view. So I come up to View, click the down arrow, then select Design View. And this lets me change the structure of my table. So here I'm not looking at the data, I'm looking at the structure of the table. When I go back to the datasheet view, I'm looking at the structure of the table. I'm looking at the data of the table instead of the structure of the table. So I'm going to close this one and come up again, and to open a new database you just go File, Open, Browse. It remembers I was on desktop. This time I'm going to open Waste Not Recycling. And you can see here I've got two tables, customer record and customer. So then I can just double click customer, and I've opened it in the data sheet view. This looks very similar to a spreadsheet. But unlike a spreadsheet, we can go in and get into design view and change the structure of our table. So here I'm in design view, and I can, add fields, I can change fields, I can delete fields. If I want to get back to the data sheet view, I come back up to View, click the down arrow, and in this case I'll select Data Sheet View. So Access gives you several different ways to create tables. You can usually best create it with in the design view. Just create a table in design view, but you can also create them by importing data from external files such as Excel spreadsheets. So here I'm going to go back, I'm going to close this database, and I'll open the one that we created new from scratch, and that was the new DB. Okay, and now we're ready to go. So again, when we open our database, we get into our database window where we can perform various actions. you'll notice that since this is the new DB we just created, it does not have any tables. To create a table, we can go over to the Create ribbon, and I have several options. I can create a blank table and, just on the fly fill it in. I can go and create a table from the design. So I'm going to click Design here, and it brings up a dialog box for me to start adding things like field names and data types, things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and type in a field name. Let's call it Instructor ID. And the data type we'll say is a number. Then I can go down here, see, in the field properties. So right up top, I'm typing in a field name, a data type, and a description. The lower part of the dialog box lets me do a lot more precise definition. So I'm going to leave it as a long integer, but I did have other choices, as you can see. And naturally, the choices are keyed to the particular information you enter in up top. Then I'm going to highlight this, and you'll notice I've got a key icon in my ribbon, and that's where I can designate something as a primary key. So I'm going to click that, and now you see that this is my primary key. And of course, we talked about the importance of primary keys in the lecture on Appendix C and also in Technology Plugin 5. Just to refresh your memory, a primary key is a unique identifier for a row. So the primary key will be the unique for each row, and that way you can get to any individual row that you're interested in. So let's make another field up and call it Instructor Name. And in this case, we'll leave it as a text field, but down here on field size, let's, instead of 255, let's make it 25. And instead of required being no, we'll say required is yes. So we won't allow nulls, in other words. And we'll go up and we'll add one more field, instructor salary. And we'll make the type currency. And we'll likewise make this one a required field. Okay, so now I'm going to close this table box right here, and it'll ask me, do you want to save the changes? I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to call the table here Instructor. So now you can see I have a table called Instructor on the left navigation pane in my Access system. You can see all the objects by clicking the down arrow up top on the left nav pane, and you can see the various things. And of course, I'm right now looking at all tables. So by default, the data type for a new field is text. To change the data type for a new field, you can open the table in Design View. So we'll go ahead like this and open the table. And then we can go into Design View, and it takes us back, and again we can change the data type as needed. Just click the drop-down arrow and you have a list of different types that you can select for that particular data field. So sometimes we want to make sure that users enter data in a particular format. We can use the input mask property to do that. And you can see the input mask in the field properties lower part of the dialog box, and it's right here. It's the third item in this case, input mask. So let's go ahead and put in an instructor phone. And here we're going to change it, and we're going to select from the predefined types. So we'll go ahead and of course save our table. Now you can see I have various predefined types: telephone number, zip code, social security, password, times and dates, and so on. These are predefined. So I'm going to try phone number, so I'll just go ahead and select that. And now I've entered an input mask for phone number for this particular table. So I'll go ahead and save it and close it. And let's go ahead and enter some data into our table. So we'll just type in a name, salary of 100, and we get to our phone number, and you'll notice it gives me the format. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Okay, press enter, and I've entered a record in. And I can likewise enter a second record in. So we've created a table, we've defined fields. Well, first we created a database, then we added a table to the database, then we added fields to the table, and then we formatted the fields, and now finally we're entering data into our fields in this particular table. Well, next let's create tables in a database from external data. So I'll go ahead and save our information here and close this particular database. Then we'll go ahead and create a new blank database. Again, we'll navigate to the folder. I'm just putting them on my desktop, and we'll call this one because this is similar to what you'll be doing for your homework. We'll give this one the name E6HW. And we'll create it. And I'm going to get rid of this. I don't want to create a table like we have been. I want to import the data from external data sources. So obviously we'll have to get up to a place where we can do that. Well, you'll notice in the database window there's a ribbon tab called External Data. So here I click on that. Then I'm going to go New Data Source. I click on New Data Source. And I'm going to go from File, and it's going to be from an Excel file, which is the first one on the list. And then I will navigate to where my particular file is. So And I'll show you at the end of this lecture, but of course you should already know that the data set, the Excel data file for this exercise is located in our resources folder under Tech Plugins under T6. And you'll see the data set you need to do your particular exercise. And I'm going to use one very similar to that. So we'll go ahead and pick that one up. So I'm going to browse, and you notice it says import the source. So I'm going to browse and navigate to where my Excel file is, and it happens to be on my desktop. Well, happens to be, oops, not in this one, happens to be on my desktop under the Spring 20 folder, under BIS, and then under Tech Plugin Data, and then T6. And I'm going to select Waste Not Recycling. You'll be doing It's a Grind Coffee. And of course, the It's a Grind Coffee Excel worksheet is in our Sakai Resources folder, Tech Plugins, T6. So, but for me, just a demo for you guys, I'm going to select T6, Waste Not Recycling. So I open that, then I click OK, and you'll notice that it finds that there's two separate worksheets in that workbook, customer and customer record. Pardon me. So first, we're going to work with customer. We'll import that, then we'll go back and make a second table by importing customer record. So now we're going to create the customer table. So I highlight customer, and I'll click next. The first row does contain the field names, so I'm going to click that. First row contains field names, and you see that now we've got our field names already defined for us. Then we'll, and I have customer ID, which is my primary key. So we'll go next. It lets me, if I want, change the types for any field. I'm going to just leave them as they are for now. Then, here's where it lets me decide how I want to do the primary key. Access will create an automatic primary key for me if I want to do it that way. I don't in this case because I already have a primary key, and that is customer ID. So I'm going to say I want to select my own primary key, and in that case I'm going to be given the choice of what I want, and I want customer ID. I click next, and then it asks me what table do I want. Customer is what I want the table's name to be, and I'll click finish. I don't need to import the steps, and now you see that I have my customer table, and I didn't have to do a lot of work. I just imported it from my Excel spreadsheet. So that's pretty convenient. Let's next import the other table. So I come back up to New Data Source, from File, Excel, browse again. I select Waste Not Recycling, and this time I select Customer Record. First row contains field names, yes. I'm going to leave the, I'm going to trust Excel to have the right field types. Now here I do want to have Excel Excel make a primary key for me. As I look at this data, I can see that customer ID is not unique here. So this is a dependent file to the customer file. So customer record is one of those weak entities that has a mandatory relationship with another one. So customer record has to have a relationship. It's mandatory that customer record have a relationship with customer. So I have the customer ID, but there can be multiple customer records. So I do not want to use the customer ID as a primary key. It will not uniquely identify a row. So in this case, I do want to let access add in my primary key. And this will be similar to your exercise. You'll have one table that is your primary table, and then the other that has a relationship to it. So the one that has a relationship to the primary, you will let access add a primary key. The primary table already has a good primary key, so just leave that in place. And of course, you can just look at the data and you could make that determination on your own as well. So now we'll go next, and we'll go ahead and leave it to be named customer record. So we create that, and now I have two tables, customer and customer record. So I can pull up customer record, and then I've got a tab up here to select between the different tables that I'm working with. So I've got these tables. Next, we want to look at defining a relationship between the two tables. And there's three types of relationships: a one-to-many, a one-to-one, and a many-to-many. When you have fields with the same name, Access automatically creates the one-to-many relationships for you. However, the fields may have different names. And also, you may want to have a little more control. So you may want to actually define the relationship beforehand yourself. And you can do that, and of course you'll need to do this for your homework. Go to Database Tools, and then in Database Tools, there'll be an icon Relationships. So you can see that right here. My cursor is pointing to it. So I'm going to click on Relationships, and it knows, okay, he's going to have a relationship between tables. So it shows me the tables I have in my database. I'm going to select both of them. And I did that by just holding the Shift key down while I clicked Customer Record. I now have both of them selected. I'm going to add them to my window. And now I've got my primary table, customer, and I've got my weak entity that's dependent on customer record. So I'm going to pull this over and create a relationship with customer ID. And I'll go ahead and click the Enforce Referential Integrity button. Oh, I've got to close my tables first before I can do that. So let me close these two tables. Okay, now I'll go ahead, drag the primary over to the secondary. Yes, I want to enforce a referential integrity. And you'll see now I've got a relationship defined, one to many. Customer, each customer may have many customer records, but one customer record will be for a particular customer, for one particular customer. So I've now defined that relationship, and I've also created referential integrity. And we've talked about referential integrity in Appendix 3 and also in Tech Plugin 5. Let's take a look at it in practice. So I now have my customer record table, and So with referential integrity, what that means is I cannot add a customer ID that is not already in the customer table. So let's take a look, and you'll notice that the highest customer ID I have is 85. So let's come back and see what happens if I try to add in a record with a customer ID of 90. So I'll type in 90 and then 3/15/2020 as the date, and my quantities will be 1 and 1, and I'll add it, but you'll notice that it says you cannot add or change a record because a related record is required in table customer. So, okay, I meant that to be 80, so I'll go ahead and change this to 80, and then hit enter and enter, and now I've added that record to my database. That is referential integrity. The foreign key, customer ID, in the customer record must have a value in the primary key, and it's also customer ID in the other table, in this case, customer. Okay, let's take a look at where your homework assignment information is. So here we are in Sakai, and we'll come down to resources, and we have our tech plugin assignments. So it's Sakai resources tech plugin assignments, and then this one is T6, so we'll click on the T6 assignment. You have a PDF that is a written document that goes over the same material we have covered in this particular video, so you can click that and read through it, and that'll give you some other insights. The instructions are in the text file called T6 instructions, and your data set is T6, it's a grind coffee. And what you'll be doing is the same thing we have just done with the waste not recycling in this particular video. You'll create a blank database, you'll import the two tables, or the tables in It's a Grind Coffee, and then you'll create a relationship between them, just like we did with the waste not recycling. Okay, this is concluding our introduction to Microsoft Access, and it provides some concrete examples, and it'll give you some concrete hands-on to apply the database concepts that we've studied in Appendix C and in Tech Plugin 5. Thank you.